He's the one who broke the promise. He is my secret.
What I did without choice.
I know.
In the name of peace and sanity.
But not in the name of the Doctor.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Unrepentant Geeking, the show on that guy with the glasses that's always bigger on the inside. I'm the Doctor. No, I tell a lie. I am in fact your host, Sean Codefeld, and I welcome you to a look at one of the most anticipated Doctor Who tie-in novels in some time, Engines of War.
Time Lords of Gallifrey, Daleks of Skaro, I serve notice on you all. Too long I have stayed my hand, no more. Today, you leave me no choice. Today, this war will end. No more. No more. Do you work? Why is there never a big red button?
Last year, the special 50th anniversary episode of Doctor Who gave us, among other things, the story of the War Doctor. I've watched that episode countless times since it aired, including just the other day for this review, and it easily holds up as one of my 5 favorite episodes in the history of the entire series. Considering said history stretches across over 800 episodes and 50 years, that's saying something. And a big part of what I responded so strongly to in the episode was the character of the War Doctor, as played by the legendary John Hurt. He, of course, was magnificent in the role, giving us such a nuanced and at times achingly powerful performance that was matched by some of current showrunner Stephen Moffat's best writing for the series. I don't know about any of you, but I can't watch that scene near the end in the shack without getting a lump in my throat. That moment when the War Doctor begs for the others to go and make his sacrifice worth something, well, it just gets me every time. It was such a strong introduction for the War Doctor that it should be no surprise that so many people, myself included, were left wanting to see more stories featuring the character. And while certain realities of life make another appearance from him on the show proper unlikely at best, this is where the world of ancillary material gets to shine. Which brings us to Engines of War, a newly released Doctor Who novel from writer George Mann, presenting an adventure of the War Doctor taken from the height of the Time War. This is the first novel to feature the War Doctor in a leading role, but based on the strength of it, I sincerely hope it does not end up being the last. As I said previously, Engines of War is set during the Time War, and focuses on the incident that at last convinced the War Doctor that he had no choice but to wipe out both the Daleks and the Time Lords. The story opens with the War Doctor leading a fleet of battle TARDISes into an engagement with the Daleks that quickly turns bad, as the fleet is wiped out with only the Doctor surviving. He soon ends up crash landing on a nearby planet under Dalek control, where he meets a teenager by the name of Cinder, whose family was killed by the Daleks when she was 4, and who ever since has been fighting alongside a resistance group in an ever-increasingly futile effort to survive. For as it turns out, Cinder's planet is located in a part of the universe that holds the key to a terrible new weapon the Daleks have invented. One that could turn the tide of the war in their favor once and for all. Having no choice but to bring Cinder along, the War Doctor sets out to stop this new Dalek plot, first by traveling to Gallifrey, and then, when things go badly there, as of course they do, by setting out on his own with Cinder in tow. Now, only a desperate last-minute act on the part of the War Doctor and his new companion can save the day, but sometimes in a war, The only path to victory requires sacrifice. Old school Whovians will be especially pleased to hear that an important character from the classic series makes an unexpected return in Engines, and ends up playing a major role in the overall story to boot. Indeed, in many ways, Engines feels like a perfect bridge between the sensibilities of old Who and new, while also having some unique flavor all its own. More than anything, this is a story soaked in sorrow and melancholy, as is only appropriate considering the time period in the series being covered. But George Mann also makes good use of the growing friendship between the War Doctor and Cinder to inject some lighter moments into the proceedings at regular intervals. Speaking of Cinder, she makes a good companion, all things told, and fits the mold nicely of the young companion whose extended interactions with the Doctor helps bring out the best in both of them. Similarly, the War Doctor is equally well portrayed, with Mann nicely capturing the tragedy of an incarnation of the Doctor who feels unworthy of the name, despite the reality being exact opposite. This is the Doctor at his very lowest, having transformed into a warrior only to have continually failed to end the war and racked with guilt and pain over the many lives he's failed to save as a result. By the end of Engines, readers will truly understand just what drove the War Doctor to his drastic actions during the Day of the Doctor, and likely will have an even greater appreciation for the character than before as well. Of course, what's a good Doctor Who story without good villains? And indeed, Engines has no lack of these either. First of all, as should come as little surprise to anyone familiar with the facts of the Time War, the Daleks are very much on hand in Engines, and indeed serve as the chief antagonist of the novel. Among other things, readers will get to meet the oft-referenced Skaro degradations, who end up being just as horrific as Doctor Who fans have long speculated they would be. Readers will also be introduced to the Eternity Circle, a group of 5 Daleks charged with developing new weapons to win the war, and capable of greater and more subtle ways of thinking than your average Dalek. As for the Predator Dalek, well, you'll just have to read the novel yourself if you want to learn about that monstrosity. Nor are the Daleks the only antagonists the War Doctor must deal with, as indeed his own people, the Time Lords, prove exactly why and how they've started to become as terrible as the enemy they fight. The resurrected Rassilon, as memorably played by Timothy Dalton in the final 10th Doctor story, The End of Time, in particular gets some serious screen time, and readers will get a good sense of how the war ended up driving him towards the actions he took in that aforementioned story. Overall, Engines of War is an action-packed and epic tale that also captures the true horrors of the Time War in all their terrible glory. It sheds light on one of the most speculated periods of the Doctor's life, while also presenting a story that can easily stand on its own merits as well. Plus, it leaves the door wide open for more stories starring the War Doctor down the line. I, for one, would love, for example, to see a tale set in the early days of the War Doctor's involvement with the Time War. Engines, after all, does open with the War Doctor working directly with the Time Lords, and it also mentions his own hopes that Rassilon would prove to be a positive force upon his initial resurrection. Seeing that relationship start to sour and the War Doctor having to work within a larger military structure could make for some great reading. Regardless, even if the War Doctor never gets another novel of his own, then at least this one is a real winner, and one story that any fan of the franchise should make reading a high priority. And that's going to do it for this episode of Unrepentant Geeking. Coming soon will be reviews of Star Wars: A New Dawn, Doctor Who: The Shakespeare Notebooks, Destiny, and the next edition of BT Classics. Until then, I'm Sean Cronenfeld, wishing you pleasant travels and happy companions in all your future and past journeys. Till next time.